Walk through a small town long enough and you'll hear stories. There is an old story about a king with donkey's ears. But I have been thinking, what if the king never had donkey's ears? What if that was not the secret? What if the barber was the one who needed the king to have them? Old stories are usually told from the angle that survived. So maybe we should not trust this one either. Maybe the barber saw nothing. Maybe he stood behind the king with his scissors and his little cloth and saw an ordinary head. An ordinary man. A man with too much power, perhaps. A vain man, perhaps. A difficult man. But still, no donkey's ears. Maybe the barber was the one who had something under his skin. Something he had carried for years. Something that had gnawed at him since childhood. Because you were a child once too. That is the annoying part. No one begins as the person lowering their voice at the table. No one is born saying, I probably shouldn't say this, but... First you are small. You sit somewhere. Under a table maybe. On the stairs. In the back seat of a car. In a room where adults think you are not listening. And the world does not make sense. Someone loves you badly. Someone does not come. Someone comes, but not in the way you needed. Someone says one thing and does another. Someone says one thing and does another. Someone cries behind a closed door. Someone pretends nothing happened. And you are a child. So you make a story. Children do that. They have to. Otherwise the world is just noise. Maybe the story was, I was not loved because I was wrong. Or, people who look calm are hiding something. Or, mothers always lie. Or, if I can find the bad one first, then it will not be me. I don't know. I am not interested in pretending I know exactly what happened. That would be the same mistake. But something happened. Or something did not happen. And it stayed. It became a small animal in the wall, gnawing. Not all the time. Some days you did the shopping, went to work, answered messages, laughed, looked normal. People usually do look normal. That is one of the most disturbing facts about people. But the animal was still there, chewing, waiting. And then one evening, or one afternoon, or one ordinary day when nothing should have happened, your mouth opened. Maybe you had been drinking, maybe not. Alcohol is often useful in these stories because it gives people somewhere to put the blame. I was drunk. I was tired. I did not mean it like that. It was the wine talking. But wine has no tongue. It was yours. Something came out. Not truth necessarily. Not confession in any clean sense. Something worse. A piece of yourself. A piece that should maybe have been told to the reeds, or to the ditch, or the forest, or a stone with enough patience. But no, you told a person, a real person, someone who could hear, someone who could remember, someone who could look at you differently after. And that is when the panic began, because now there was something in the room, not the king's ears, yours. Not literally. Of course, not literally. That is how fairy tales speak when ordinary language is too clean. There was something showing, something misshapen, something hungry, something you had kept under your hat for a long time. And once it had been seen, you needed another story quickly. So you pointed. Not here, there. Not me, the king. Look at him. Can't you see? Donkey's ears. And maybe the other person wanted to see them. That helps. There is always someone who wants the story. Someone bored, someone wounded, someone waiting for permission, someone who also needs a place to put their own animal. So now there are 2 of you, then 3. A small chorus. A chorus is dangerous because it starts feeling holy to itself. 1 person says something and it is gossip. 2 people say it and it becomes concern. 3 people say it and suddenly it has weight. People say, well, everyone has heard something. Everyone, as if everyone is a witness, as if repetition has eyes, as if a story grows a spine because enough people carry it badly. This is how it works. You do not have to say, I made this. You say, I'm worried. You say, I may be wrong, but. You say, I only want what is best. You say, someone had to say something. That sentence has done a lot of damage in the world. Someone had to say something, maybe. But maybe not you. Maybe not like that. Maybe what you needed was not truth. Maybe what you needed was relief. There is a difference. Truth asks to be carried carefully. Relief just wants out. Relief will use any door. A kitchen table, a message, a party, a relative, a friend, a child, a glass in the hand. And when relief leaves the body, it feels like honesty. That is the trap. You feel lighter, so you think you were right. But vomiting also makes a person feel lighter. That does not make it medicine. Sometimes it is only what the body could not hold. There are people who live this way, not obviously, not with horns or with black cloaks. The old stories make it too easy. They give the monster teeth so we know where to look. In real life, the monster often has a reasonable voice, a careful face, a clean kitchen, a sentence prepared in advance. The monster says, I don't want to get involved, then gets involved. The monster says, I am not judging, then judges. The monster says, I probably shouldn't say this, then says it. Of course. The mouth was already full, and the person you speak about begins to change. Not in reality. Reality is stubborn, but in the village, in the family, in the little invisible court people carry inside themselves. The person becomes a figure. The difficult one, the unstable one, the false one, the bad mother, the arrogant artist, the fake victim, the dangerous one, the one who must have done something because why else would people say it? That is the cleverness of it. The story proves itself by existing. People are very impressed by existence. If a thing is said often enough, it begins to feel like a stone in the road. You stop asking who put it there, you just walk around it. And the one who was spoken about? They still have to live. That part is rarely interesting to the chorus. They still wake up. They still make tea and buy potatoes. They still walk past windows. They still hear their own name differently. They still enter rooms with their body already braced. They still wonder which version of them arrived before they did. This is why I think the old story is wrong or incomplete. Maybe the king did not have donkey's ears. Maybe the barber did. Or maybe the barber has no ears either. Maybe he only had shame. Maybe he had envy. Maybe he had fear. Maybe he had something he once said and could not unsay. Maybe he had seen himself too clearly for 1 second and needed another face to hang it on. That is projection, not as a nice, clean word, not as something in a psychology book, as a fairy tale mechanism. You cannot carry yourself, so you make someone else into a beast. Then you gather people to look at the beast, and then you say, "See." And if the beast protests, even better. Now it has made a sound. Now it looks like the story. There is almost no way out of that kind of spell. Silence becomes guilt. Anger becomes proof. Sadness becomes instability. Explanation becomes manipulation. This is why these stories are so poisonous. They do not need truth. They only need a role. Once the role is given, everything feeds it. That is also why authentic people irritate you. Not because they are perfect. No one is. Perfect people are not authentic. They are edited. What irritates you is the person who keeps being alive in the wrong direction. The artist who keeps making work. The singer who keeps singing. The dancer who keeps dancing. The mother who does not collapse neatly into the accusation. The poet who survives the public trial. The person who laughs again. The person who refuses to become only the worst story told about them. That is unbearable if you needed the story to be true. So you repeat it. You tend it like a fire. You add details. A detail does not have to be correct. It only has to be vivid. People remember vivid things. They remember the stain, not who spilled it. After a while, the reeds grow. The story no longer needs the barber. Anyone can whisper it now. Anyone can pass by and say, "King Midas has donkey's ears. King Midas has donkey's ears. King Midas has donkey's ears." And the barber can stand there looking innocent. He can even look sad. He can say, "I never meant for it to go this far." Maybe he didn't. That is possible. People release things they cannot control all the time. Dogs, fire, children, words. But not meaning harm is not the same as not doing harm. The reeds do not care what you meant. The person carrying the story in their body does not get to live inside your intention. They live inside the consequence. That is the part polite people like to skip. They want to be understood by their intention and feared by their impact. Does not work like that. At least not forever. Because one day the living person may stop entering the courtroom. Not because everyone understands. They won't. Not because the barber confesses. He probably won't. Not because the village becomes wise. Please, villages have been villages for a very long time. But because something in the living person says, "No, not this, not anymore." Tell it to the reeds, tell it to the ditch, tell it to the sea, tell it to the stones by the road, tell it to whatever part of the world has no mouth. But do not hand me your animal and call it mine. Do not spill yourself and point at my face. Do not call it concern when it feeds on another person's life. Do not call it truth just because it made you feel clean. The old stories knew about curses. They knew words could travel. They knew a village could become an instrument. They knew the monster was not always outside the gate. Sometimes the monster was the mouth at the table, the reasonable voice, the person who had to say something, the person who could not bear what came out of them, so they made ears for the king. And maybe the king kept walking. Maybe that is the part no one tells. Maybe he heard the reeds. Maybe he knew. Maybe he understood that the sound was not prophecy, not truth. Only wind moving through hollow things. Only an old shame looking for a body. Only a barber somewhere, still afraid of his own mouth.